Killing Jason Todd. In the late 80s, DC pulled a stunt no one saw coming. Instead of deciding Robin's fate in the writer's room, they handed it over to fans with a 1-900 phone number. Two numbers, two choices: save Jason Todd or let him die. For 50 cents a call, readers had the power to shape Batman's world. When the votes came in, Jason's death won by a razor-thin margin, just 72 calls. What followed became one of the most infamous moments in comic history. The Joker beat Jason with a crowbar and left him to die in an explosion. Batman arrived too late, cradling his partner's broken body. For readers, it was shocking, brutal, and unforgettable. For DC, it was a PR storm. Some fans loved the boldness, others saw it as a cheap gimmick, exploiting tragedy for sales. Even writer Jim Starlin, who had pitched the idea, grew disillusioned with the backlash and eventually left the Batbooks. The impact on Batman was immediate. Jason's death haunted Bruce for years, feeding storylines about his guilt, paranoia, and reluctance to take on new sidekicks. It also cemented the Joker as Batman's ultimate nemesis, but the so-called mistake didn't stay buried. In 2005, DC resurrected Jason Todd as the Red Hood, transforming him into a darker reflection of Batman's mission. Suddenly, one phone poll from 1988 was still shaping Gotham decades later. Fans have argued ever since about whether Jason's death was worth it. Was it bold storytelling or a cynical marketing trick? Either way, that hotline decision changed Batman forever. Paralyzing Barbara Gordon. Alan Moore's The Killing Joke was supposed to be a one-off graphic novel, a dark Joker origin story, not a seismic shift for Batman's world. But DC editorial gave Moore permission to go further. When he asked how far he could push Barbara Gordon, the response was chilling. "Cripple the bitch." That one line sealed her fate. Midway through the book, the Joker arrives at the Gordon home, shoots Barbara through the spine, strips her, and photographs her broken body to torment her father. The moment was meant to showcase Joker's cruelty, but it reduced Barbara, Batgirl, to a plot device. A vibrant hero suddenly sidelined as shock value. There was no plan for her future, no thought about her long-term role in Gotham. The fan reaction was explosive. Some readers saw it as bold and disturbing storytelling, while others called it gratuitous and sexist. Barbara's injury lingered far beyond The Killing Joke, keeping her paralyzed for decades. She lost her role as Batgirl, and her character existed in limbo until writers reimagined her as Oracle, the information hub of the DC universe. Ironically, what began as a cruel editorial afterthought became one of DC's strongest portrayals of resilience. Oracle mentored heroes, hacked global networks, and proved she was more than what the Joker tried to take from her. Still, the controversy never went away. Moore himself later admitted regret over how the story was handled, calling it one of his biggest missteps with DC. Even as Oracle thrived, critics argued Barbara's fate came from a place of exploitation, not creative vision. Over time, The Killing Joke became both legendary and infamous. It gave the Joker one of his darkest victories, but at the cost of Batgirl's agency. Breaking Batman's back. By the early 90s, DC was experimenting with shock-driven storylines. Superman had died in '92, so the next step was to push Batman to his breaking point, literally. Enter Nightfall. Bane, a brand new villain, wasn't just another muscle-bound thug. He was written as the ultimate strategist. First, he orchestrated a massive Arkham breakout, unleashing Gotham's worst criminals all at once. Batman, already exhausted, spent weeks hunting them down. When he finally returned to Wayne Manor, broken and worn out, Bane was waiting. What came next became one of the most infamous pages in Batman history. Bane lifting Bruce over his head and snapping his spine. For readers, it was brutal and shocking. Batman was crippled, confined to a wheelchair, and out of commission for the first extended period in his publication history. To fill the gap, DC introduced a new Batman, Jean-Paul Valley, also known as Azrael. Unlike Bruce, Jean-Paul's approach was extreme. He modified the costume into a high-tech armored suit, brutally punished criminals, and ignored Batman's core values. The reaction was mixed at best. Sales were strong, but fans were vocal about their dislike of Azrael. He felt more like a parody of 90s comic excess than a worthy successor. Gotham itself seemed to reject him, and readers longed for Bruce's return. Behind the scenes, the arc also reflected an industry trend, replacing iconic heroes to test sales and shake up continuity. Eventually, Bruce recovered and reclaimed the cowl, but the broken Bat story left a lasting impression. It proved that Batman could be physically beaten and mentally pushed beyond his limits. At the same time, it nearly derailed the franchise with a stand-in no one truly wanted. Abandoning Gotham. In 1999, DC rolled out one of the boldest Batman events ever, No Man's Land. The setup was apocalyptic. A massive earthquake ripped through Gotham, leveling buildings, cutting power, and leaving the city in ruins. The US government responded by sealing Gotham off, declaring it uninhabitable and abandoning its citizens. Bridges were destroyed, borders were barricaded, and Gotham became a lawless wasteland overnight. That premise alone was huge, but what made the story infamous was Batman's absence. In the early stretch of No Man's Land, Bruce Wayne simply disappeared. While Commissioner Gordon, Oracle, and the GCPD tried to hold the city together, Gotham's gangs carved the streets into territories. Characters like Penguin, Two-Face, and even Harley Quinn, making her mainline comic debut, thrived in the chaos. Fans were baffled. How could the world's greatest protector abandon his city at its darkest hour? When Batman finally returned, the story kicked into gear, but the damage was done. The event ballooned across dozens of titles, with multiple writers and artists weaving in and out. The result was uneven. Some issues delivered gripping, emotional arcs, Cassandra Cain stepping in, as the new Batgirl became an instant classic, while others drowned in filler or clashing tones. Readers were split between loving the ambition and feeling frustrated by the execution. Behind the scenes, No Man's Land was DC trying to top Marvel's sweeping crossovers of the 90s. They wanted Gotham to feel like its own post-apocalyptic world. Instead, the scale sometimes overwhelmed the storytelling. For every highlight, like Gordon's strained partnership with Batman, there were entire arcs that felt directionless. Over time, though, the event carved out a strange legacy. Cassandra Cain's Batgirl became a fan favorite. Harley Quinn's transition from animation to comics made history, and Batman's absence, once criticized, became a talking point about how Gotham survives without him. Batman's anti-Justice League plans. In 2000, DC dropped a storyline that made fans question whether Batman belonged on the Justice League at all. Tower of Babel, written by Mark Waid, revealed one of the Dark Knight's darkest secrets. He had created detailed contingency plans to take down every single member of the League. Superman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Aquaman, even the Flash. Batman's paranoia wasn't the only twist. Ra's al Ghul got hold of those plans and weaponized them. One by one, the Justice League fell to precision attacks based on Batman's files. Superman was exposed to red kryptonite radiation, driving him into a frenzy. Aquaman was dosed with a fear toxin that made him terrified of water. Martian Manhunter was set on fire with nanites. Flash was hit with vibrations that risked tearing him apart at super speed. Green Lantern was blinded with a psychological trap that made him doubt his worthiness to use the ring. Every weakness was exploited, and it all traced back to Bruce Wayne. When the dust settled, the League confronted him. Batman defended himself, arguing it was irresponsible not to have safeguards against the most powerful beings on Earth. But for his teammates, the betrayal cut deep. Trust had been broken. The League actually voted on whether he should remain a member, and the vote was against him. For fans, this storyline sparked years of debate. Was Batman a genius realist who understood the stakes, or had his paranoia gone too far? Either way, Tower of Babel reshaped his reputation. The idea that Batman was always 2 steps ahead, always prepared even to take down his allies, became a defining part of his mythos, revealing Batman's identity. In 2002, DC launched Batman: Hush, a 12-issue saga written by Jeff Loeb with art by Jim Lee. It was designed as a blockbuster event, packed with nearly every major Batman villain and ally, high-octane fights, and a brand new mystery villain named Hush. At its core was a question that felt unthinkable. What if Batman's secret identity was finally exposed? The story ran through one massive betrayal after another. Poison Ivy brainwashed Superman into fighting Batman. Killer Croc was mutated further than ever before. Catwoman and Batman's romance heated up in ways fans hadn't seen in decades, but the thread that tied it all together was Hush, a bandaged mastermind who seemed to know every move Bruce Wayne made. Halfway through, the tension spiked. Hush manipulated events so carefully that it looked like Bruce Wayne's dual life as Batman was about to unravel. At one point, even longtime allies like Catwoman began to doubt him. For fans, the possibility of Batman's identity being fully revealed wasn't just shocking. It felt like the foundation of Gotham's mythology was at stake. When the dust cleared, the twist landed. Hush was Thomas Elliot, Bruce's childhood friend turned bitter enemy. He had orchestrated the entire scheme, piecing together Batman's life in terrifying detail. While Bruce's identity wasn't splashed across Gotham's headlines, the fact that someone so close had figured it out rattled readers. Critics were split. On one hand, Hush revitalized sales and gave fans some of the most iconic Jim Lee artwork in Batman's history. On the other, the heavy reliance on fake-outs, even resurrecting Jason Todd briefly before revealing it was Clayface, left some feeling the mystery didn't live up to its build-up. Still, Hush left its mark. It reminded fans that Batman's greatest vulnerability, the possibility of losing his anonymity, erasing Batman's memories. In 2004, DC released Identity Crisis, a story meant to dig into the darker secrets of the Justice League. Instead, it opened one of the most controversial chapters in Batman's history. At the center of it all was a secret the League had been hiding for years. They had crossed a line that left their own teammates scarred, both literally and mentally. The revelation came through the story of Dr. Light. After he assaulted Sue Dibney, the wife of Elongated Man, the Justice League voted to erase his memories and alter his personality so he would never repeat it. But that wasn't the only mind wipe. When Batman stumbled onto the scene and tried to stop them, the League made a shocking choice. They erased his memory too. The world's greatest detective, stripped of his own recollection, betrayed by the people he fought beside. The consequences were massive. Batman's already shaky trust in the League crumbled. He realized the heroes he considered allies were willing to tamper with his mind, violating the very principles they claimed to uphold. This was a scar left by his own team. Fans and critics tore into the decision. Some praised it as bold storytelling that showed moral complexity. Others saw it as character assassination, making the League hypocrites and robbing Batman of his autonomy. The move echoed for years, fueling Batman's paranoia and deepening his isolation. His creation of the Brother Eye surveillance system, a satellite designed to monitor every hero on Earth, stemmed directly from this betrayal. For Batman, the memory wipe was the confirmation of his worst fear, that even the people who claimed to stand for justice couldn't be trusted. For readers, it became one of the most unsettling mistakes in DC's modern era, reshaping the way Batman viewed friendship, loyalty, and the very idea of the Justice League. Skipping a year ahead. After Infinite Crisis, every ongoing title jumped forward exactly 1 year in continuity. Readers opened their favorite series to find 12 months had passed in story, and no one knew what had happened during the missing time. For Batman, it was one of the strangest narrative resets in his publishing history. At the start of 1 year later, Bruce Wayne had taken time away from Gotham, leaving Nightwing and Tim Drake to hold things together. When he finally returned, Batman was more focused, sharper, and seemingly refreshed. Gotham looked different too. Villains had shifted power, alliances had changed, and new threats were rising. It was a complete reset of the board, and fans were thrown straight into the aftermath with no context. The missing year was slowly filled in through a separate weekly series, 52, which chronicled the events that happened while Bruce was gone. That series introduced major developments, like Renee Montoya becoming The Question and Black Adam's global rise. But in Batman's corner of the DC universe, the time jump created problems. Some arcs felt rushed, others left too many questions unanswered, and the sense of momentum readers had before the event got cut short. The gamble was divisive. On one hand, 1 year later gave writers creative freedom to reintroduce characters with fresh dynamics and explore how Gotham evolved in Batman's absence. On the other, fans who craved continuity were frustrated. Key storylines were left hanging, and the time skip felt like DC skipping past the messy consequences of Infinite Crisis. Unleashing Zur-En-Arrh. In 2008, Grant Morrison took Batman into one of the strangest corners of his mythology with Batman R.I.P. The story introduced casual readers to something they had never seen before, a backup Batman personality known as the Batman of Zur-En-Arrh. The concept originated in a 1958 Silver Age comic, where Batman briefly traveled to a planet called Zur-En-Arrh and fought crime in a colorful, campy suit. Morrison, known for digging up obscure continuity, reimagined it decades later as something far darker. In his version, Bruce Wayne had created a psychological failsafe inside his own mind, a fractured identity programmed to take over if his primary self was ever broken or brainwashed. When the Black Glove organization attacked, driving Bruce to the brink of insanity, that backup kicked in. Readers suddenly saw Batman in a purple, red, and yellow costume, armed with a baseball bat and talking to an imaginary Batmite. It was jarring, surreal, and completely unlike the gritty Dark Knight fans were used to. For some, it was brilliant. Morrison's idea turned Batman's paranoia into a strength, proving he was so prepared that he even had a version of himself ready to emerge if his mind collapsed. For others, it felt absurd, a campy throwback shoved awkwardly into modern continuity. The rainbow-colored Batman running through Gotham with a bat was hard for many to reconcile with the shadowy, brooding detective of the modern era. The controversy didn't fade quickly. Fans argued whether it was genius meta-commentary or a tonal misfire that undercut Batman's seriousness. But one thing was certain: Zur-En-Arrh made people talk. Morrison's willingness to embrace forgotten, bizarre history and weave it into a major arc showed just how malleable Batman's mythos could be. To this day, the Batman of Zur-En-Arrh remains one of the most polarizing twists in the character's history, proof that even the Dark Knight isn't immune to the weirdest corners of comic book storytelling. Killing Batman with Darkseid's Omega Beams. In 2008, DC promised a universe-shaking event with Grant Morrison's Final Crisis. At the center of the chaos came one of the boldest and most debated choices in Batman's history: his apparent death at the hands of Darkseid. The buildup was huge. Darkseid, the godlike tyrant of Apocalypse, had conquered Earth through corruption, mind control, and raw cosmic power. Heroes were scattered, the world was unraveling, and in the middle of it stood Bruce Wayne, determined to stop him. Armed with a god-killing bullet, Batman broke his one rule and fired the shot that Morrison mortally wounded Darkseid. It was one of the most shocking panels ever published, Batman pulling the trigger. But the moment didn't end in triumph. Darkseid unleashed his Omega Sanction, the death that is life, blasting Bruce with beams of pure cosmic energy. The panel of Batman's charred skeleton, cape draped over it, spread across the page like the ultimate finale. Readers thought it was over. After decades of survival, Batman was gone. Superman carried Bruce's body out of the fire in one of the event's most haunting images. Then came the twist. Batman wasn't actually dead. The Omega Sanction had displaced him in time, flinging him into the prehistoric past. Over the next year, Morrison wrote The Return of Bruce Wayne, a saga of Batman fighting through history to claw his way back to the present. For some, it was ambitious storytelling. For others, it was convoluted, confusing, and robbed the original death scene of its impact. Fans were split. Some called it one of the gutsiest Batman arcs ever attempted. Others felt cheated, saying Batman's death should have been permanent, or at least less tangled in cosmic weirdness. What could have been a clean, unforgettable end became one of the most polarizing mistakes in Batman's history, killing Damian Wayne. Introduced by Grant Morrison in Batman and Son, 2006, Damian was the biological child of Bruce Wayne and Talia al Ghul, raised by the League of Assassins before being dropped into Gotham's world. At first, readers bristled at his arrogance and violent tendencies, but over time, his evolution into Robin, alongside Dick Grayson's Batman, won fans over. Damian became the brat who grew into a hero. Then came Batman Incorporated number 8. In a storyline orchestrated by Morrison, Damian faced his end. During a battle with Leviathan, Talia's global organization, Damian fought against his own clone, the hulking, genetically engineered heretic. Outmatched in size but refusing to back down, Damian held the line to protect Gotham and his allies. The fight ended with Heretic driving a sword straight through his chest. On the page, Robin died. The backlash was immediate. Fans were furious that Morrison had killed a character who had finally cemented himself as a true Robin. Damian's death wasn't just another sidekick loss. This was Bruce Wayne's son, the only biological child in his long legacy of partners. The emotional fallout was brutal. Bruce's grief dominated Batman comics for months as he spiraled deeper into obsession and rage. Even Nightwing, who had shared the closest bond with Damian, was devastated, with their brotherly relationship cut short. Morrison explained that the arc was meant to close Damian's story, showing the cost of Batman's endless war. But for many readers, it felt unnecessarily cruel. Damian had only just found his place in the Bat family, and his death seemed more like shock value than natural storytelling. Of course, death is rarely permanent in comics. Damian was resurrected a year later thanks to a mystical chaos shard. Still, the decision to kill him left scars, both in-universe and among fans. For a moment, the Bat family lost its youngest member, and Batman was forced to carry yet another grave reminder of how dangerous his world truly is. Framing Wally West. In 2018, DC launched Heroes in Crisis, a story meant to explore trauma in the superhero community. At its core was Sanctuary, a secret facility created by Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, where heroes could process the psychological toll of their battles. The premise was powerful, superheroes dealing with PTSD, grief, and burnout. But instead of sparking praise, it led to one of the most reviled storylines in modern DC history. The controversy came when the series turned its spotlight on Wally West, the Flash, who symbolized hope and optimism. Once a fan-favorite successor to Barry Allen, Wally was framed as a killer. According to the story, his grief over the loss of his family caused him to lose control, unleashing a surge of Speed Force energy that killed several heroes in Sanctuary. To cover it up, he staged the crime scene, even manipulating timelines to frame others before planting evidence to incriminate himself. For readers, this wasn't just a plot twist. It felt like character assassination. Wally West had spent decades representing joy, resilience, and the legacy of the Flash. Reducing him to a murderer and liar broke trust with fans who had followed him since the 1980s. Batman's involvement as one of Sanctuary's architects only made the backlash louder. Instead of healing, Sanctuary became a graveyard. Critics hammered the series for exploiting trauma while failing to handle it with care. The deaths of characters like Arsenal and Lagoon Boy felt like empty shock value, and Wally's downfall left a bitter aftertaste. What was billed as an emotional human story became infamous for dismantling one of DC's most hopeful heroes. In the years since, DC has walked back much of Heroes in Crisis, redeeming Wally and restoring his reputation. But the damage lingers. For many, it's remembered less as a bold experiment and more as one of the biggest editorial mistakes of the Rebirth era. Batman and Catwoman's frustrated romance. Few relationships in comics have been teased as long or pulled apart as often as Batman and Catwoman. Since the 1940s, Bruce Wayne and Selina Kyle have danced around each other, locked in a cycle of attraction, betrayal, and unfinished business. By the time Tom King took over Batman's main series in 2016, readers thought they might finally get a definitive payoff. King built the romance front and center. Bruce and Selina's bond deepened across dozens of issues, from rooftop meetings to a proposal under Gotham's moonlight. Batman asked Catwoman to marry him, and for a while it looked like DC was about to make history. A bat wedding was set for Batman number 50 in 2018, hyped across the industry as a turning point. Retailers placed huge orders, fans debated the implications, and DC marketed it as the event that would change Gotham's future. Then came the twist. On the day of the wedding, Selina left Bruce at the altar, convinced that Batman could never be Batman if he was happy. The issue dropped like a bomb. Instead of celebration, fans got heartbreak. What had been built up for 2 years unraveled in a single issue, with the relationship shoved back into limbo once again. The backlash was loud. Many readers felt misled, saying DC had strung them along only to pull the rug out at the last second. Some critics defended the move as keeping with Batman's tragic nature, but for others it was a betrayal. Another cycle of endless teasing without resolution. Sales were strong, but the trust between DC and its audience took a hit. Even after Batman number 50, the romance remained stuck in stop-and-start storytelling. Spin-offs like Batman/Catwoman tried to rekindle the arc, but the damage lingered. What could have been one of the most definitive love stories in superhero comics became another example of DC's reluctance to let its characters grow. The Bat and the Cat remain iconic, but their almost wedding is remembered as one of the great missed opportunities in modern comics. The Three Jokers reveal. In 2016's Justice League Darkseid War, Jeff Johns dropped a bombshell. Batman, seated in the Mobius chair with access to infinite knowledge, asked one of the biggest questions of his life: what is the Joker's real name? The chair's answer stunned him. There weren't just one Joker, but three. It was a tease so wild it shook fans across the industry. Speculation exploded. Did this mean different Jokers across eras? Golden Age prankster, Silver Age clown, and modern psychopath? Would Batman finally learn the ultimate truth about his greatest enemy? For years, readers waited. The mystery lingered until 2020, when Johns and artist Jason Fabok released Batman: Three Jokers, a prestige format miniseries that promised to resolve it. The story revealed three archetypal Jokers working in tandem: the criminal, the clown, and the comedian. Each represented a different era of Joker history, and together they terrorized Gotham in a brutal wave of attacks. On the surface, it sounded like the definitive Joker story. In execution, fans felt let down. While the art was stunning and the mood darkly cinematic, the central question, why three Jokers exist, was never fully explained. Instead of cosmic revelations or timeline-shattering answers, the book leaned into ambiguity. By the end, Batman confessed he had known the Joker's identity all along, choosing to keep it secret to protect Joker's family. For readers who had followed the mystery for years, the payoff felt underwhelming. That disappointment overshadowed the book's stronger moments, like Jason Todd confronting his trauma or Barbara Gordon processing her history with Joker. Instead of redefining the character, the series became known as a missed opportunity. And that's it. Now to you, what are your thoughts? After 8 decades of chaos, is Batman defined more by his victories or by the mistakes that never stop haunting him? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. As you leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more amazing videos like this one.